Hey guys, tonight we slip beneath the smoke-dark rafters of a forgotten century. The fire's barely embers, the air smells of damp straw, and the only thing between you and the freezing dawn is a scratchy wool blanket that might also be home to 3 fleas and a spider named Gregory. You're in a village no map remembers, somewhere in the 1300s, and outside your door the world is hard, cold, and waiting to test you. You probably won't survive this winter, but let's pretend you might. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments below. Love seeing how far these sleepy stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The rooster doesn't crow till silent. What wakes you instead is smoke clawing at your throat. The hearth never truly dies, just sighs through the night, coughing sparks through cracks in the chimney. You roll from the straw mattress, toes sinking into dirt that's more ice than earth. The hut's single window is a square of gray light, thin as parchment. Your breath fogs like a ghost trying to escape your mouth. Welcome to January 1347, somewhere in Northern Europe's exact location, irrelevant. Misery feels the same everywhere. You reach for your tunic, stiff from frost, and tug it over your linen shift. The cloth is itchy and smells faintly of sheep. Outside, the village creaks awake. A dog whines near the door, tail tucked between its legs. Somewhere, a baby cries, the sound echoing through walls woven from wattle and daub. Everything here breathes, leaks, and listens. You duck through the low doorway and step into the bone-white light. The world looks like it's been powdered with ash. The thatched roofs sag under frost, and thin trails of smoke thread up into the sky. You can't see the sun yet, just a pale smear behind clouds. But you know where it sits because the ice on your right cheek burns harder than the left. The first job of the day is to get water. The stream's half frozen, so you grab a wooden bucket and trudge down the rutted path, boots crunching. The sound is satisfying, like stepping on old bread crusts. The air smells faintly of manure and wet wool. There's comfort in that. It means life hasn't stopped, only slowed. When you reach the stream, the surface is crusted with a thin sheet of ice. You kneel, break it with your fist, and the shock slices through your skin. Beneath the ice, water moves sluggishly, reflecting a sky the color of pewter. You fill the bucket, stand, and stretch your back. Across the way, smoke curls from the blacksmith's hut. He's already awake, beating life into cold metal. The clangs echo through the valley, steady, rhythmic, almost musical. You make your way back to the village center, where a few neighbors huddle around a dying fire pit. They're trading news. Though news travels slowly, hear one rumor per season, give or take. Someone mentions wolves in the woods. Someone else swears the priest's goose laid an egg with a cross on it. You nod like it's perfectly normal. Superstition is breakfast food around here. A woman in a patched cloak waves you over. She's stirring a pot of thin porridge, the kind that tastes mostly of regret. You accept a bowl, the steam fogging your face. It's made from barley, not oats, the cheap stuff. You chew slowly, savoring the illusion of warmth spreading through your chest. A bit of humor sneaks in. You glance down and realize a chicken has been staring at you the entire time. Congratulations, you have an audience for your suffering. Villagers live by pattern. Pray, work, eat, pray again. Maybe sleep if the lice permit. The church bell marks each rhythm. It tolls once for dawn mass, again for work, again for evening prayer. Time isn't measured by clocks, but by sound and hunger. When the bell rings, even the dogs pause to listen. You shuffle toward the small chapel on the hill, breath clouding. The priest, thin, stooped eyes like candle smoke, waits at the door. Inside, the air is damp and smells of tallow. The walls are painted with saints and demons, their faces fading from smoke and time. You kneel on the hard floor. The priest mumbles Latin. You don't understand most of it, but you bow anyway. Everyone does. Belief isn't always about understanding. It's about surviving the space between explanations. Mainstream historians agree. By the 1300s, the church shaped nearly every part of European village life. Birth, work, illness, even the timing of weddings all filtered through a bell and a blessing. But here's the strange part. Villagers sometimes mixed holy water with charm spells, carved crosses beside pagan runes, and whispered old words to protect their cows. Historians still argue whether the clergy tolerated it out of ignorance or quiet pragmatism. After all, as long as the tithe came in, no one minded a few extra saints real or imaginary. The sun drags higher, melting a bit of frost from the thatch. You and your neighbors move toward the fields, though fields might be too generous a term. They're half mud, half hope. The earth sleeps, but you scratch at it anyway, turning soil, checking for rodents, cursing at roots that refuse to budge. Your hands cracked from cold. You wipe your nose with your sleeve because handkerchiefs are for nobility. A man jokes that the cows look holier than he does, since they get blessed more often. You laugh, mostly because it keeps you warm. He's not wrong. The livestock matter more than people. Sometimes lose a cow, and you lose milk. Dung for fuel, maybe a future plow. A child runs past, chasing a chicken, shouting triumphantly when he nearly catches it, then trips into a puddle. The village roars with laughter, a brief spark in the gray day. By midday, the frost softens to mud. The women gather at the communal oven, massive, stone-built, the one piece of infrastructure that never sleeps. They bring dough shaped like small loaves and gossip like it's oxygen. Someone mentions the Reeves' daughter sneaking out at night. Someone else swears she's learning charms from a traveling tinker. You nod politely, pretending you don't care, though everyone does. You take a turn chopping kindling, the rhythm meditative. The axe splits the wood clean, scent of pine releasing into the air. For a moment, time slows. The distant hills blur into mist, and the crows call like echoes of old prayers. As evening creeps in, the sky bruises purple. You trudge home, tired but still alive, a small victory. Supper is a stew thickened with barley and cabbage. It's hot, heavy, and tastes faintly of smoke. You eat with your fingers, wiping your chin with the back of your hand. Across the table, someone tells the story of a village farther north where a monk turned water into beer. Nobody believes it, but everyone wishes it were true. Before bed, you feed the fire a final log. The sparks leap like tiny spirits. You lie down again on your straw mattress, pulling the blanket up to your chin. The hut creaks in the wind, a lullaby made of wood and weather. Through a hole in the roof, a single star peers in, mocking, maybe, or keeping watch. A soft chuckle escapes you. You've survived another day in the 1300s, barely. Tomorrow will be the same. Frost, hunger, work, prayer. But there's a strange comfort in that repetition. Modern life spins too fast. Here, at least, the world moves at the pace of a heartbeat. As your eyes close, you think of the church bell, silent now. You imagine its sound rolling across the hills, calling ghosts and dreamers alike. The air grows warmer near the hearth. Outside, snow begins to fall again, slow and soundless. The flakes settle on the roof, sealing the night tight. Somewhere in the dark, an owl hoots, a reminder that even in this forgotten corner of history, life keeps listening. Morning again, though morning feels generous. The light that leaks through the slits in your shutters is more gray than gold, more I'm sorry than sunrise. You wake to the smell of damp wool and last night's ashes. A hen clucks near your feet. Somehow, it has decided your hut is a public venue now. You stretch, hit your elbow on a ceiling beam, and mutter a word that technically counts as medieval profanity, but would still make your priest frown. Outside, the village hums awake. Smoke snakes upward from crooked chimneys. The dogs bark at everything, including nothing. You wrap a shawl around your shoulders, tie your worn boots with frayed string, and step into the mud. Congratulations, you're officially ready for your shift in a world without clocks, coffee, or paid holidays. The air smells faintly of yeast and manuredly comforting, like someone tried to bake bread in a barn. You head toward the communal bread oven, clutching your lump of dough. Bread isn't just food, it's a timeline. Every family needs their day into its who's pregnant, who's dying, who's grumbling about taxes again. Today, your dough's a little too sticky, maybe like your mood. You add a handful of rye flour, hoping to disguise the mistake. Inside the baking shed, heat licks your face like a friendly dragon. A few women tend the loaves with long paddles, chatting the way people do when gossip's the only entertainment left. You catch fragments someone's goat gave birth to twins. Someone else swears a shooting star last night means the weather will break. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers truly believed omens or just liked having something to blame when things went wrong. Either way, you nod along as though the cosmos really is judging your bread today. You hand your dough to the baker, a stout woman with forearms that could arm wrestle destiny. She slides it in beside the others and hands you a small cup of weak ale breakfast of champions. The ale's sour, cloudy, and just strong enough to make you forget how cold your fingers are. Fun fact: back then, ale was safer than water, since boiling and fermenting killed off the worst bacteria. You could call it health food in a roundabout, barley-flavored way. Outside, the mud squelches underfoot. Children chase each other with sticks. One's pretending to be a knight, another's pretending to be a dragon, and both look equally underfed. You smile, mostly because imagination is free. A scrawny cat darts between legs, looking for crumbs or kindness. The Reeves' wife passes by, balancing a basket of eggs on her hip. You greet her politely. She nods back with the kind of nod that says, "I know everyone's business, including yours." She probably does. Villages run on mutual surveillance, no secret survives sunrise. By mid-morning, the bread's ready. You collect your loaf, warm and crusty, and tear off a piece right there. The taste is smoky, rough, and oddly sweet. Tiny flecks of bran stick between your teeth. You chew slowly, savoring something that feels like victory in carbohydrate form. Next stop, ale brewing. A few houses down, the brewer and old man with eyebrows like feral hedges tends a bubbling cauldron over open flame. Steam fills the shed, thick with the smell of wet grain and hope. You lean close, watching him stir. "Secrets in the mash," he says, not looking up. If you talk to it, it behaves. You're not sure if he's joking or serious. Around here, it's usually both. He hands you a ladle for a taste flat, sour but strangely comforting. Brewing's one of the few village jobs that blurs gender lines. Men, women, even kids help. Ale is the social glue fuel for gossip, wages, and courage. A stray joke: you remember last week's batch exploding because someone forgot to cool it. The smell lingered for days like an alehouse had sneezed across the village. Even now, a faint whiff haunts the thatch. You carry your share of brew home in a clay jug, careful not to spill. The road's a maze of mud puddles and animal droppings, so you tiptoe like you're crossing a battlefield. Near the well, a few men are repairing a cartwheel. Their hands are calloused, nails blackened from soil and soot. One hums a tunofki, but heartfelt. You pause a moment to listen. The melody isn't one you recognize. It might be older than memory. Around noon, the sun appears a pale coin briefly flicked through the clouds. You sit outside with your bread, cheese, and ale. The cheese is sharp, the bread gritty, but after hours of cold, it feels like a feast. Someone shouts across the square about a peddler coming through next week. That's news. Peddlers mean color, stories, maybe even a scrap of imported cloth if you're lucky. Mainstream historians note that medieval villagers relied heavily on these traveling merchants. They were the internet of the age-bringing gossip, goods, and the occasional scandal. You imagine him now, trudging along muddy tracks, sack over shoulder, humming to his mule. He'll arrive with knives, ribbons, miracle cures made of questionable ingredients, and maybe a few rumors about distant wars that'll sound like fairy tales here. After eating, you join a few others patching roofs before the next storm rolls in. You climb a wobbly ladder, clutching handfuls of straw. The wind smells of rain. From up here, the village looks small, like a handful of clay toys dropped in a puddle. You can see the chapel, the mill stream, the fields beyond, still gray from winter. Everything fits together like parts of a humble clock, each person a gear grinding against time. You tie new thatch over the holes, fingers prickling from the chill. Below, a boy watches you and waves. You wave back, accidentally drop a straw bundle, and narrowly miss his head. He laughs. You apologize. You decide it counts as one of your 3 daily jokes. By late afternoon, your muscles ache pleasantly. You climb down, shake straw from your hair, and glance toward the stream. A woman kneels there, washing clothes in icy water. Her hands are red and raw, but she's singing a slow, lilting tune about lost sailors and faithless saints. The notes drift through the mist like breath. You crouch beside her to help, plunging your hands into the numbing current. Soap's a luxury here, made from ashes and lard. It smells faintly like last week's dinner. You scrub tunics, wring them out, and hang them on a line strung between crooked posts. The wind lifts the damp cloth like ghost flags. Evening brings a weak glow from the setting sun. You carry your jug of ale to the fire pit in the village center. People gather, the blacksmith, the reeve, a few children. Even the priest who claims he's here to watch over the flock but never refuses a cup. Someone strums a fiddle, another claps along. The stories begin, tales of spirits in the marsh, of monks who turn invisible when they sneeze, of a fish that grants wishes if you kiss it under a full moon. Nobody believes them fully, but nobody dares dismiss them either. You listen, smiling at the absurdity. Then someone mentions famine years past when bread ran out and bark became seasoning. The laughter fades a little. The fire pops. History is never far here. It sleeps under every patch of soil. Still, warmth wins out. Someone passes around roasted chestnuts, and you burn your fingers grabbing one too soon. A little girl giggles at your expression. You tell her you did it on purpose, testing for poison. She gasps, then grins. Night deepens. The stars peek through the thin clouds, silver and sharp. You sip the last of your ale and lean back, letting the smoke sting your eyes. Life here is hard, dull, and breathtaking in small ways. You think about tomorrow's tasks: fixing fences, mending clothes, maybe trading a few eggs for a candle stub. Nothing heroic, just the endless rhythm of staying alive. Before you head home, the priest begins a prayer, thanking God for bread and breath. The words drift upward, tangled with smoke. You bow your head, not because you're pious, but because gratitude feels right when warmth is this fragile. As you walk back, your loaf tucked under your arm, you pass the mill. The wheel creaks lazily in the moonlight, dripping. The air smells faintly of wet grain. You pause, listening. The night carries distant sounds: an owl's call, a dog's bark, the sigh of the wind through the fields. Somewhere, your heart keeps pace with it all. Inside your hut, you place the bread beside the hearth, the jug beside it. You sit for a long moment, watching the flames dance. They throw shadows that look like faces, old, familiar ones maybe. You laugh softly, tired but content. The chicken from this morning hops onto your bed again, claiming it like a throne. You sigh and let it stay. After all, warmth is warmth, even if it clucks. You curl beneath your blanket, listening to the crackle of the fire. Outside, frost is already forming on the window pane, painting it in silver lace. You close your eyes, feeling your heartbeat slow. Somewhere in your dreams, you'll still be kneading dough, still turning the mill, still breathing steam and smoke. But for now, the village sleeps, and so do you. The bell tolls before you're fully awake, though awake here is a relative term. Your eyelids are still glued together with yesterday's dust and last night's dreams, and the cold bites at every exposed inch. You shove your feet into stiff boots, tug on your tunic, and prepare to follow the invisible rhythm dictated by a bell that has been marking days for centuries. Breakfast is a thin gruel, barely flavored with barley and perhaps a pinch of salt. Someone adds a few frozen berries, daring to call them luxury. You eat slowly, savoring the warmth of the bowl against your fingers. Every mouthful is a reminder. You exist, and the world hasn't entirely ended yet. The church bell tolls again, summoning the faithful, or at least those too polite to ignore it. The villagers gather in the small chapel on the hill, a squat building with walls thick as a bear's shoulder. You follow, shuffling through mud, past half-frozen puddles that glare at you like tiny mirrors. Inside, the air is dense with candle smoke and incense, a faintly choking perfume. The priest, stooped and thin as a reed, mutters his prayers in Latin. You join in half-heartedly, knowing the words by sound, if not by meaning. Around you, candles flicker, their light dancing across the faces of your neighbors. Some are young, bright-eyed, eager for the day. Others are old, wrinkled, hardened by frost and labor. Religion in the village isn't optional. The bell signals everything: mass, work, meals, and occasionally the approach of misfortune. It orders time itself, carving life into neat, predictable segments. Mainstream historians note that in the 1300s, the church was the village's de facto calendar, its authority extending into mundane tasks like milking cows or preparing for market. Yet, fringe practices persist. Charms tucked into boots, crosses carved on doorframes, whispered prayers to saints for a good harvest. Historians still argue whether villagers genuinely believed these practices or merely performed them out of tradition and habit. You, of course, nod politely as if you understand both. After Mass, you wander back into the streets, which are muddy and lined with huts. The baker waves a hand, showing off a fresh batch of bread, crust thick and golden. You bite into a piece, savoring the heat that spreads like a small victory through your body. Down the lane, a woman shakes a basket of eggs, the clatter echoing off walls of wattle and daub. Children scamper past, chasing a dog that has decided your morning is its personal playground. You step over frozen droppings with exaggerated care, pretending it's a heroic feat. By mid-morning, the labor begins. Fields, such as they are, demand attention. The frost has lifted enough to reveal soil that is stubborn and uncooperative. You help dig furrows, checking for stones, roots, and the occasional burrow of a creature that has no interest in sharing its home. Sweat mingles with mud, frosting your hairline with damp grit. You pause, wiping your brow with the sleeve of your tunic, and notice the horizon, smoke from other chimneys, the curve of distant hills. The way light falls awkwardly across the frozen stream. Work is punctuated by the bell again, calling the village to a pause for midday prayer. You trudge to the chapel once more, joints aching, muscles stiff. Inside, the priest reads from a tome that smells of mold and candle wax. You wonder, briefly, if the book contains useful advice or merely sacred stories designed to remind you of your place. Outside, the wind picks up, rattling shutters and tugging at cloaks. The cold seeps in through gaps in the doors, a persistent reminder of mortality and the frailty of thatched roofs. Lunch is simple: leftover bread, a hunk of cheese, perhaps a few root vegetables dug from storage. You eat with your neighbors, exchanging news that is both trivial and vital. Someone mentions that the Lord Steward is coming to inspect taxes. Another whispers about a fox that has been stealing chickens. The village thrives on this exchange of information, each rumor a thread weaving social cohesion. In the afternoon, you return to chores. Some repair the roofs, reinforcing thatch with mud and straw. Others tend to the animals. You help feed the cows, shoe chickens, and sprinkle grain for the pigs. A small child watches, fascinated, and you offer a few instructions on how to hold a pitchfork without impaling oneself. They nod seriously, absorbing wisdom that may save them or someone else later. The sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows that stretch across the muddy paths. You pause to rest, leaning against a fence post, listening to the hum of the village. The blacksmith works tirelessly, hammering glowing metal into tools and horseshoes. Sparks fly, catching briefly in the dying light, and you imagine they are tiny fireflies trapped in molten stone. A crow caws in response, adding a percussion line to the village's ambient soundtrack. Evening approaches, and the church bell calls again. Villagers gather at the communal oven, baking bread for the morrow, checking the temperature of ale, and sharing stories that blur the line between truth and embellishment. Someone recalls a tale of a distant monastery where monks turned water into beer, unlikely but delightful. Laughter spreads, carrying warmth across the square. The day winds down with simple pleasures. You watch the sun dip below the hills, painting the sky with streaks of purple and gold. The wind softens, carrying with it the sense of cooking fires, drying straw, and the occasional tang of manure. A cat snakes between your legs, purring loudly, demanding attention. You kneel to scratch its ears, finding solace in the familiar softness. Dinner is modest but satisfying. Stew thickened with barley and whatever vegetables survive the frost. You sit with neighbors, sharing the meal and conversation. Someone mentions last year's harsh winter, a reminder that survival here is never guaranteed. Yet, you eat, laugh, and drink weak ale, savoring small victories. As night falls, the fire pit glows, casting flickering shadows across faces lined with toil and experience. Stories continue, tales of mischievous spirits, saints with peculiar habits, and occasional wonders witnessed by travelers. You listen, a small smile playing at your lips, aware that even in hardship, joy persists in small, stubborn doses. Before bed, you walk back to your hut, loaf and jug in hand. The moon peeks through clouds, silver and sharp. The village is quiet, alive only with the soft stirrings of night creatures. You slip under your straw mattress, pull the blanket tight, and watch the last sparks die in the hearth. Your heartbeat slows. The day is done, and for now, you are alive, warmed by bread, ale, and the shared rhythm of a village that has endured centuries of frost, hunger, and human stubbornness. Outside, the wind whispers through the fields. Somewhere, a dog howls, a reminder that life, for all its harshness, persists. You close your eyes, ready to drift into dreams where the bell tolls, softly guiding you through another day in this 1300s village. Where bread is sacred, ale is safer than water, and survival is the quiet, constant art of living. The thaw comes slowly, teasing the land with hints of softness. You wake to a morning where frost no longer grips the ground in iron fists, though puddles of mud remind you winter has not fully released its grip. Birds sing with cautious optimism. Crows, always dramatic, caw in the trees, plotting their next raid on the grain stores. You slide your feet into boots caked with yesterday's mud, tug on your tunic, and step outside into the weak but promising light. Spring is deceptive. The air carries a hint of warmth, but wind still bites. You trudge toward the fields, clutching a basket of tool saws, spades, and a small wooden rake. Your muscles groan, still stiff from months of frozen labor, but there's something exhilarating about soil that will finally yield. The villagers are already awake, and their rhythms, forged by centuries of survival, flow around you. Women carry water from the stream. Men drag plows pulled by oxen, and children scamper between, laughing as though frost never existed. You reach the first field, a patchwork of mud and buried roots. The earth smells sweet, damp, and alive. You kneel, breaking the soil with a hand tool. The cold that lingers in your fingers seems polite compared to last month. You uncover small insects, worms wriggling in their morning work, oblivious to your intrusion. You smile there, just as busy surviving as you are. Villagers gather seeds, the grains for the coming harvest. Barley, oats, peas, each tiny kernel represents hope. You sprinkle them into furrows, pressing them gently with the flat of your palm. Some fall into mud, some into cracks, and you know not all will grow. Still, the act of planting feels like defiance against winter's harsh memory. Historians note that planting rituals often combine practical timing with symbolic gestures, intended to ensure fertility. And then there are fringe tales. Some villagers whisper that leaving a kernel uneaten on the doorstep invites protective spirits to guard the crops. Historians still argue whether these practices truly affected yield or merely comforted anxious hearts. A small boy runs past you, chasing a frog with wild determination. You try to warn him about mud bogs, but he ignores you, shrieking with delight as he jumps into the nearest puddle. Mud splashes against your legs, but you laugh anyway. Spring has a way of softening the edges of discipline. Around midday, the priest appears, walking slowly through the fields. He carries a small wooden cross and sprinkles holy water, murmuring prayers for a bountiful season. You watch him, torn between respect and bemusement. The villagers bow their heads, some muttering their own silent pleas, others simply shielding their eyes from the sun. You join in reflexively, aware that belief, routine, and survival are tightly intertwined. After the priest moves on, work continues. Women tend small gardens behind the cottages, pulling weeds and planting lettuces, onions, and carrots. The scent of tilled soil mixes with the faint tang of manure, a pungent perfume of productivity. You kneel beside a neighbor to help plant beans, laughing when a rogue beetle crawls up your arm. "Maybe it's checking if we're serious," she jokes, and you nod, appreciating her dry humor. Around the village square, children carry buckets of water, their laughter echoing against the low, crooked walls. You pause, watching them, and realize the rhythms of play are as important as work. A moment of levity is a necessary antidote to hardship. One girl twirls a ribbon, claiming it's a magic wand to help seeds grow faster. You smile, secretly wishing it might actually work. The fields demand constant attention. Plows break clods, oxen snort, and the air is thick with dust and effort. You lift a clump of earth, feel its weight, and realize how intimately the villagers know every inch of their land. Work here is tactile, immediate, and endlessly consuming. A misplaced seed or neglected furrow could mean weeks of lost sustenance. By afternoon, your hands are blistered, your back sore. But the sense of accomplishment hums quietly beneath the exhaustion. You take a moment to drink from a wooden cup, water cold and crisp. Across the field, a scarecrow stands, patched with rags and topped with a carved pumpkin. Its empty eyes watch over the crops, a mute guardian. Some swear it keeps birds away. Others claim it invites helpful spirits. You shrug their way, it's a small comfort. Around mid-afternoon, the village gathers for a brief break. Women wash their hands in a trough, children sit on logs, and men stretch and wipe sweat from their brows. You lean against a fence post, taking in the scene. It's noisy, chaotic, but somehow harmonious. Conversations drift from gossip to weather predictions to dreams of better harvests. You listen, feeling the subtle pulse of the village life, the shared rhythm that binds each person to the next. The sun climbs and falls with relentless steadiness, marking time in golden streaks across furrowed fields. Birds flutter in the hedgerows, insects buzz in the warm air, and the faint scent of blossoms hints at growth and renewal. You spot a neighbor trying to corral a pig, mud splattered and squealing, and can't help but laugh. Life here is messy, tactile, and stubbornly beautiful. Historians point out that spring was both the busiest and most hopeful season for medieval villagers. Survival depended on planting accurately, protecting seedlings, and anticipating weather shifts. Fringe studies suggest some farmers left offerings to river spirits, hoping for rain. Historians still argue whether such rituals influenced crop success or merely gave the worried a sense of control. You find it plausible, if only for the comfort it brings to anxious hands and minds. By late afternoon, clouds gather, promising rain. You help a few neighbors carry buckets of water back to cottages, keeping the animals watered before storms arrive. Children run ahead, splashing in puddles with abandon. The smell of wet earth rises, pungent and grounding. You inhale deeply, savoring the reminder that growth follows hardship. Evening creeps in, and you return to the communal oven for a brief meal. Bread, fresh from the hearth, warms your fingers, cheese completes the simple feast, and a small cup of ale adds a touch of indulgence. Conversation drifts toward harvest predictions, livestock rumors, and who has the brightest daffodils in their garden. You listen, participate, and feel the subtle comfort of shared life, of community that persists through mud, frost, and toil. The priest returns briefly, sprinkling holy water over animals and crops, whispering blessings. Villagers bow their heads, some muttering their own prayers, others watching skeptically but respectfully. Faith, routine, and survival coexist here, intertwined and inseparable. You nod along, understanding that the acts themselves carry as much weight as belief. Night falls gently, and you walk back to your hut, the earth soft beneath your feet. The air is warm from the day, but carries the promise of evening chill. You place tools aside, wash your hands in the cool water, and sit for a moment by the hearth, feeling residual warmth from the fire. Outside, stars begin to pierce the fading light. The village grows quiet, save for the occasional cough, cluck, or distant shout. You prepare a simple supper, stew thickened with barley, seasoned with whatever herbs survived winter. The taste is humble but sustaining. You eat slowly, reflecting on the day's labor, the small victories, and the faint promises of a fruitful year. Afterward, you sit near the fire, listening to neighbors share stories, punctuated by sighs of relief at another day survived. By the time you crawl beneath your blanket, the village has softened into the lull of night. The earth smells of mud and growing things. The hearth retains its gentle heat, and your heartbeat slows. You close your eyes, letting the rhythm of life in this resilient village carry you toward sleep. Dreams of furrows, seedlings, and sun-dappled fields mingle with memories of laughter and stories. Somewhere, an owl calls from the trees, a sentinel of the night. You breathe deeply, feeling the pulse of the land, the community, and your own fragile survival. Tomorrow will bring new work, new challenges, and perhaps new laughter. But for now, the village sleeps, and so do you. The sun is high when you wake. Though high in this village means pale and uncertain, filtered through clouds that haven't yet decided if they're carrying rain or just gloom. Today feels different, though you can sense the electricity in the air, a mischievous energy hovering between work and play. It's midsummer, or close enough for local celebration. You wrap a shawl over your tunic and step outside, the mud giving way beneath your boots with every squelch. Children dash past, shrieking with delight, and you stumble over a stray chicken. They're in no hurry to school, because here, lessons are learned in fields, at ovens, and through the slow accumulation of stories. You follow the crowd toward the village green, where preparations for the solstice festivities are already underway. Wooden poles are being erected, ribbons attached, and herbs strewn across the ground in patterns whose meanings are only partially understood by anyone alive. The bell tolls, though today it rings with a kind of celebratory cadence. Villagers pause their chores, faces tilted upward, taking a moment to acknowledge both the sun and the church. Religion dictates structure even on festive days. So everyone humors the priest as he sprinkles holy water over the gathering, mumbling prayers that are mostly ceremonial but carry weight nonetheless. Mainstream historians note that the church often tried to suppress pagan customs, yet allowed certain seasonal celebrations to continue in hybrid forms. Fringe tales claim that some villagers deliberately kept minor pagan practices alive to coax spirits into helping crops and livestock. Historians still argue whether these rituals were subversive, practical, or simply tradition dressed in superstition. You wander past the maypole, noting the ribbons fluttering in the wind. Villagers are beginning dances, weaving between poles, laughing, clapping. The sound is exuberant, a stark contrast to the rigid cadence of winter. You try to join, but stumble slightly, narrowly avoiding a small girl twirling with uncanny precision. She glares at you with mock seriousness, and you bow with exaggerated politeness, earning a ripple of laughter. One of the older men whispers that dancing in this way supposedly keeps fairies from meddling in the harvest. You grin, thinking of last year's scarecrow incident, and wonder whether a mischievous spirit did indeed move the oxen. Children are everywhere, chasing each other through the grass, squealing in delight. You pause to watch a boy who has tied a ribbon to a stick, declaring it a magical sword capable of vanquishing imaginary dragons. The crowd laughs. Even the priest glances down from his vantage, shaking his head with a smile that betrays amusement. You join in the laughter, feeling a lightness that winter could never offer. Midday comes with sun teasing through clouds, warm enough to peel off a layer of tunic, but still brisk enough to remind you of lingering frost in shaded corners. The women begin arranging tables with food, bread, cheese, small pastries made of honey and nuts, and roasted meats modest, but enough to mark celebration. Men carry ale from barrels stored near the communal oven, the brown liquid, frothy, and heady. You sample some, grimacing at the temps, but secretly appreciating the ritual. Ale, as you recall from past months, is both sustenance and social lubricant, safer than water, and far more enjoyable. A game begins. Villagers split into teams, attempting to toss small bundles of straw into a cartwheel set upright in the middle of the green. You join in, arms flailing, laughter echoing through the hills. One neighbor teases you for your lack of skill, and you respond with a dramatic feint that sends a straw bundle flying straight into the mud. The boy next to you applauds, calling it heroic failure. You bow, accepting the title. The priest, meanwhile, has wandered off to whisper to the elders about upcoming harvest blessings. From a distance, he seems distracted but content, allowing the village to maintain its playful chaos without interference. Fringe historians speculate that clergy tolerated such celebrations because they reinforced communal ties, ensuring that productivity would continue after the revelry ended. You nod along, considering that there is wisdom even in chaos. Music rises. A fiddler strums a melody that's just slightly off, yet it harmonizes perfectly with the laughter and chatter. Villagers begin dancing, hand in hand, circling around the maypole. Ribbons wrapping and unwrapping with mesmerizing complexity. You join in hesitantly, letting the rhythm guide you. For a moment, the hardships of the year-frozen mornings, muddy fields, aching muscles fade into irrelevance. Movement becomes meditation, and laughter becomes a kind of prayer. Children run between the dancers, giggling as they dodge adults' feet. You spot the small girl from earlier, ribbon wand still in hand, who now declares that she has summoned fairies to protect the village from misfortune. Nobody questions her. The story is accepted, folded into the fabric of communal belief. You remember similar tales from winter, about a goose with a cross-shaped egg or a fox stealing chickens with divine guidance. Life here mixes magic, superstition, and reality so seamlessly that distinguishing between them feels unnecessary. By late afternoon, the sun begins its descent, stretching shadows across the green. You find a moment to sit on a log, sipping ale, watching the villagers continue their games. A small argument breaks out over rules in one of the contests, but laughter quickly dissolves tension. The villagers have learned, through years of shared experience, that mid-year festivals are about community, joy, and the subtle art of surviving winter's shadow. You notice the blacksmith, usually stoic, laughing as he juggles small stones with a child. Sparks from the forge behind him catch in the sunlight, glittering like tiny fireflies. Nearby, women trade herbs and small charms, supposedly for protection against misfortune. Historians note that trade during festivals was common, both as practical barter and as a subtle reinforcement of social hierarchy. Fringe research suggests some charms contained mixtures of herbs believed to influence luck, fertility, or crop growth. Historians still argue whether these beliefs materially affected outcomes or simply offered psychological reassurance. As evening approaches, torches are lit, casting flickering shadows across the green. Food is shared, music continues, and storytelling begins in earnest. Tales of trickster spirits, wandering knights, and saints with peculiar habits dominate conversation. You sit by the fire, listening, occasionally adding a comment or chuckle. One story describes a traveler who turned water into wine miracle, or perhaps just an impressive fermentation mishap. Either way, the villagers delight in the exaggeration, letting imagination soar. Night settles slowly, and the festivities wind down. The maypole is taken down, ribbons carefully coiled for next year. And the villagers return to their huts, tired but satisfied. You follow, carrying a small bundle of leftover food and a flask of ale. The moon is high, silver light washing over rooftops and fields, softening the hard edges of cottages and fences. Inside your hut, you place the food near the hearth, warmth from the dying fire lapping at your toes. You sit for a moment, listening to the distant laughter fading into night. The smell of straw and smoke is comforting, a reminder that life continues despite harsh weather, hard labor, and fleeting fortune. You drink the ale slowly, savoring its bitter tang, a small indulgence at the end of a long, joyful day. Before bed, you step outside one last time. Stars scatter across the sky, glittering above the fields where children ran only hours ago. The wind carries faint laughter and the scent of baked bread and roasted meat. Somewhere, a dog barks softly, a sentinel of the night. You inhale deeply, feeling connected to the village, to the earth, and to the rhythms of life that persist despite time and toil. You crawl beneath your blanket, letting the warmth of the hearth linger in your bones. You think of the day's dances, the music, and the laughter, allowing it to fold into memory. Sleep begins to claim you, gentle and unrelenting, carrying you into dreams where ribbons twirl, maypoles rise, and the village is alive with the stubborn, persistent joy of midsummer. Morning arrives quietly, though the air carries a weight far heavier than the sun's hesitant light. You wake to the smell of smoke and damp straw, heart pounding from a restless night. Something lingers in the village, a whisper of unease like the faint tremor before a storm. You tie your tunic, step over stray chickens, and notice a thin haze curling around the rooftops, faintly acrid. Sickness has arrived, or perhaps it's only rumor. Either way, it is felt before it is seen. You trudge toward the communal hearth, where a few early risers huddle, sharing scraps of news. A child coughs. The sound is sharp and unsettling. The baker murmurs something about herbs, claiming they can take the rot out of lungs, and you nod politely, aware that comfort often masquerades as medicine here. Mainstream historians confirm that villagers in the 1300s relied heavily on herbal remedies and folk cures in the absence of trained physicians. Fringe sources suggest that some of these cures were paired with charms or whispered spells to enhance potency. Historians still argue whether these practices genuinely improved survival or were primarily psychological support. Either way, you sip your thin ale, grateful for the illusion of immunity. Outside, the village moves cautiously. Tasks continue, but there is a subtle shift. Eyes dart, hands linger over amulets, and whispers circulate like wind through reeds. You help fetch water, the stream now faster with spring runoff, currents tossing ice fragments downstream. A woman scrubs clothing vigorously, occasionally murmuring prayers. You consider offering a word of reassurance, but none come. Faith and fear intermingle, each bolstering the other in strange equilibrium. By mid-morning, the reeve arrives, an official bearing the mark of authority and an unavoidable aura of tension. He moves deliberately, eyes scanning faces for signs of non-compliance or illness. Villagers bow politely, exchanging murmured greetings. you notice the subtle ways fear manifests. A hand twitching toward a charm, a cough stifled with careful calculation. Survival here relies as much on caution as labor. You move toward the barn, where the animals are already restless. The cows low, the goats bleat, and pigs snort, each sensing the unease permeating the air. You sprinkle feed slowly, mindful of every movement. A child watches, wide-eyed, whispering questions about illness and death that are met with quiet, careful responses. Knowledge is fragmented, rumor thrives. By late morning, the sick are isolated in small huts. Herbs are boiled in cauldrons, their pungent aroma filling the air. You stir careful not to spill, imagining that each motion sends a ripple of protection through the village. Someone whispers about the efficacy of garlic. Another swears by willow bark. You nod, noting the parallel to modern medicine. Some remedies are surprisingly effective, others merely comforting. Stories circulate about the source of the illness. A visiting traveler, tainted water, bad air. No one knows for certain. You hear a legend about a previous outbreak when villagers burned herbs and chanted to the saints. The pestilence retreated, or so the story claims. The truth is elusive. You remember reading that even well-documented epidemics left gaps in understanding, forcing communities to improvise. Afternoon brings more ritual than labor. The priest walks among the afflicted, sprinkling holy water and muttering prayers. Villagers offer small gifts, eggs, herbs, scraps of bread. You watch a young mother cradle her fevered child, whispering comfort that is both tangible and spiritual. The air is heavy with smoke, herbs, and the tension of vigilance. You assist with the distribution of food, careful to maintain distance where needed. Bread, porridge, and weak ale are delivered to those too sick to gather their own. You note how small acts of care ripple through the village. A gesture of kindness sustains morale almost as much as nourishment. Fringe accounts suggest that community solidarity was as crucial to survival as any medicine. Historians still argue whether such cohesion significantly reduced mortality or merely helped villagers cope with inevitable loss. By late afternoon, the sun lowers, casting long shadows that exaggerate the village's imperfections. Uneven huts, mud-slick paths, and leaning fences. You pause, observing the laborers who continue despite risk. Some repair roofs, others tend animals, and a few children fetch water. The rhythm of work persists even amid fear, a testament to resilience. The priest begins an evening prayer, calling for protection, health, and mercy. Villagers kneel, some in genuine faith, others in habit, all participating in the communal attempt to reclaim control. You join quietly, hands folded, finding solace in the shared ritual. The sound of murmured Latin blends with the evening air. A reminder that structure provides comfort even when uncertainty reigns. Dinner is a modest affair, eaten quietly. Stew thick with barley and herbs is shared among families, portions carefully measured. You notice the subtle ways community adapts. Extra food reserved for the weak, smaller portions for the healthy, the occasional loaf set aside for later. Each action is deliberate, ensuring survival amid scarcity. Night falls, heavy and silent. You step outside for a moment, inhaling the cool air scented faintly with smoke and wet earth. A dog howls, the sound echoing across fields, perhaps a lone sentinel or merely a creature echoing your unease. You return to your hut, tuck the blanket around your shoulders, and consider the day's quiet heroism, tending the sick, preserving the healthy, maintaining routine in a world suddenly fragile. Sleep comes fitfully, haunted by visions of coughing villagers, the acrid smell of herbs, and whispers of protective spirits. Yet the fire's warmth, the bread's solidity, and the quiet presence of the community provide solace. Somewhere, the bell tolls softly in your dreams, reminding you that even fear has its rhythm. And even amid illness, life continues, stubborn, patient, and enduring. Dawn stretches across the village slowly, pale and tentative, as if even the sun is unsure whether to rise fully. You awaken to the muted cawing of crows and the low murmur of the stream. The air is crisp, carrying faint scents of damp straw, smoke, and soil. You wrap your shawl tighter around your shoulders, tie your tunic, and step outside. Boots squelching through mud, softened by recent rains. Today feels different, not festive, like midsummer. Not tense, like illness, but transitional. A hinge between the harshness of winter and the promise of full spring. Chickens cluck and dart about, pecking at the scattered grain from yesterday's meal. You pass neighbors carrying water and bundles of herbs, exchanging brief nods and murmured greetings. Each face carries its own story. A line of fatigue here, a spark of curiosity there, a silent worry tucked beneath practiced calm. You breathe deeply, taking it all in. You make your way toward the fields, where work never truly stops. The frost has left the earth soft, and the first shoots of barley push through the soil like timid green fingers. Villagers are already digging, planting, and tending. You kneel beside a patch of young shoots, pressing soil gently over seeds, marveling at the fragile determination of life. Historians note that medieval agriculture demanded constant vigilance. The timing of planting and the care for seedlings could determine a family's survival. Fringe accounts suggest some villagers whispered charms over seedlings to ensure growth, tracing patterns in soil thought to guide spirits favorably. Historians still argue whether these rituals were rooted in practical understanding or pure superstition. But either way, they reveal the human need to assert control over uncertainty. A boy runs past you, chasing a frog that has emerged from the edge of the stream. Mud splashes onto your tunic, and you laugh despite yourself. Children here learn through observation and play, absorbing lessons about the land and its rhythms long before books exist for them. You remember how you once slipped in a puddle, narrowly avoiding a goat's kick, and chuckle at the memory. By mid-morning, the baker emerges from his hut, carrying fresh loaves. The aroma of warm bread mingles with the scent of wet soil and animals. You break a piece, savoring the crisp crust and soft interior. Here is never merely sustenance, it's an anchor, a tangible reminder that life continues. You notice the brewer tending a small barrel of ale, stirring carefully, checking consistency. Even today, when labor is heavy and hearts are cautious, ritual matters. Ale is both medicine and morale, a reminder that ordinary substances can hold extraordinary power in human perception. The priest appears in the square, walking slowly, carrying a small bundle of herbs. He blesses the seeds, whispers prayers over the animals, and sprinkles holy water on the pathways. Villagers bow respectfully, some muttering their own incantations. Faith here is a tool, a comfort, and a social glue. Historians point out that the Church's presence regulated daily life, while fringe studies suggest certain ceremonies were intentionally performed to ensure compliance or cooperation. Historians still argue whether belief was genuine or performative, but the effect on village order is indisputable. By late morning, you join a few neighbors in repairing fences. Wood is soaked from the recent rain, splinters prick your fingers, and the hammer is heavy in your hand. Yet, there is satisfaction in the physicality of labor, the sense that you are shaping your environment and securing your family's future. A woman passing by carries a basket of eggs. One slips and rolls into the mud. She shrieks, you retrieve it, and she smiles sheepishly, muttering thanks. Life here thrives on small kindnesses, the delicate balance of cooperation and survival. Lunchtime brings modest fare, stale bread softened in water, a slice of cheese, and an apple if you're lucky. Villagers eat together when possible, sharing news, rumors, and small comforts. A neighbor mentions that the miller's son has found a strange stone in the river, claiming it brings luck. Others dismiss it lightly, though they examine it with curiosity. You remember similar tales from previous years. The way human imagination transforms mundane objects into talismans, shaping culture and ritual. Afternoon tasks begin with tending livestock. Cows, goats, and pigs require attention. Fences must be checked, water replenished, and feed distributed. You work quietly, noting the subtle personalities of each animal. One cow, obstinate as ever, refuses to move. A goat nudges you playfully. Labor is a conversation, not just a chore. Fringe lore suggests some villagers spoke to animals in ritualized tones, believing it improved health and productivity. Historians still argue whether such practices affected behavior or were merely expressions of care. Either way, animals respond to attention, whether spiritual or practical. As the sun climbs higher, clouds begin to gather, promising a brief shower. Villagers pause briefly to cover tools, secure thatch, and usher children indoors. You take a moment to lean against a fence post, appreciating the rhythm of life, the way labor, rest, and ritual intertwine seamlessly. Music rises in the distance, a fiddle's squeaky notes, the clapping of hands, and a child's laughter. Even amidst work, joy persists, threaded through the day in unexpected ways. The shower arrives, soft at first, then stronger, drumming on rooftops and turning the paths into treacherous mud. Villagers continue their tasks, adapting as they must. You tie your hood, gripping your tools, and wade carefully through puddles. The water carries scents of earth, leaves, and faintly of manure reminders that life is messy, but life is real. You pause to observe children splashing gleefully, unhindered by dirt or wet, and feel a twinge of envy at their fearlessness. Late afternoon brings more storytelling. Villagers gather beneath a tree near the stream, sharing tales of clever foxes, wandering monks, and distant towns they have never visited. You listen, amused and attentive. Stories serve multiple purposes: entertainment, instruction, and the subtle reinforcement of communal norms. Fringe accounts suggest some tales were exaggerated to teach lessons or reinforce authority. Historians still debate the extent to which oral storytelling shaped medieval culture versus mere amusement. The day wanes, and you assist in preparing food for the evening. Bread is sliced, stew ladled into bowls, and ale poured into cups. You sit among neighbors, exchanging small jokes. Recalling previous mishaps, the goat who toppled a cart, the baker's dough disaster, the child who mistook a frog for a magical creature. Laughter eases tension, a balm against the relentless demands of rural life. Evening falls, bringing long shadows and cooler air. You step outside to admire the village. Rooftops darkened, smoke curling upward, and the distant stream catching fading light. The animals settle, the children tire, and the village seems to exhale collectively. You watch the blacksmith hammer one final horseshoe, sparks glinting like fireflies, before he too retreats indoors. By night, the village is quiet, punctuated only by the occasional cluck, cough, or distant shout. You settle by your hearth, placing your tools aside, sipping weak ale, and letting the warmth seep into your bones. You think about the day's labor, the stories, the laughter, and the shared rhythm that sustains this small, resilient community. As sleep approaches, you crawl beneath your blanket, warmth lapping at your shoulders. You remember small victories, the loaf baked just right, the fence secured, the laughter shared. Outside, stars glimmer faintly, the night alive with unseen creatures and whispered winds. You close your eyes, letting the pulse of village life, steady and patient, carry you into dreams where work and play, toil and joy, blend seamlessly into the tapestry of survival and community. The next morning arrives without fanfare, though the air feels charged with anticipation. You awaken to a faint, sweet aroma drifting from nearby cottages, the scent of fresh bread and boiling herbs mingling with the earthy perfume of mud and grass. The sun rises slowly, painting clouds in pastel hues, and you pull on your tunic, secure your boots, and step into the village streets. The soft squelch of mud underfoot accompanies you, a reminder that spring has finally begun to assert itself, though remnants of frost cling to shady corners. Children dart past, their laughter ringing like bells in the stillness, chasing stray chickens or tossing stones into the stream. You watch them, their small feet caked in mud, and feel a pang of admiration. Learning here is tactile, earned through play and observation, where every stumble is a lesson and every chase a test of agility. One boy points triumphantly to a frog that has taken refuge under a rock. You grin, recalling your own childhood misadventures, and continue toward the fields. The villagers are already at work. Women tend small garden plots behind cottages, fingers digging through soft soil as they plant lettuces, onions, and carrots. Men lead oxen across fields, plows turning earth with rhythmic precision. The blacksmith tends to his forge, the clang of hammer against metal echoing faintly across rooftops. You join in, helping with tasks as needed, feeling the familiar ache of muscle and joint a reminder that labor is both necessity and meditation. Historians note that physical work in the 1300s was relentless, leaving little room for idle moments, yet simultaneously reinforcing social bonds and individual skill. Fringe accounts suggest that some villagers performed small rituals before labor, invoking luck or protection from unseen spirits. Historians still argue whether these practices were effective or simply a form of psychological reassurance. By mid-morning, the bell rings, signaling a pause. You follow neighbors to the chapel, stepping carefully through mud. Inside, the priest murmurs prayers, his voice echoing softly against stone walls. Candles flicker, illuminating faces lined with effort and experience. You join the chorus, hands folded, though your thoughts wander to the day's work. Faith here is inseparable from routine rituals anchor life amid uncertainty, even as they offer comfort against harsh realities. Returning to the fields, you notice subtle signs of growth. Barley shoots pushing through soil, small buds on the trees, and a patch of wildflowers daring to bloom along the stream. You kneel to examine the young shoots, pressing soil gently around them. The act is repetitive, but grounding, a small defiance against the unpredictability of weather and fate. You remember that last winter nearly claimed the village's livestock. Such hands-on care feels like a shield against misfortune. Children gather near the stream, attempting to catch tadpoles with makeshift nets. One girl wields a stick as if it were a magic wand, declaring that she will summon rain for the crops. You smile, recalling fringe tales of child seers and small whimsical rituals believed to influence growth. Adults pretend to ignore such antics, yet you suspect they take solace in them. There's a rhythm here. Work, play, ritual, labor, all threads interwoven into the fabric of survival. Around midday, the baker carries fresh bread to the communal oven. The aroma drifts across the village, drawing small crowds. You tear off a piece, savoring the crisp crust and soft interior. Bread here is more than nourishment. 'Tis comfort, a tangible sign that the cycle of work and reward continues despite hardships. A neighbor mentions the upcoming market day in the nearby town, a rare opportunity for trade. You nod, considering the journey, the risks of travel, and the chance to exchange news and goods. The priest appears again, carrying herbs and chanting softly. He moves among villagers, sprinkling water on crops and livestock. The air carries the mingled scents of smoke, mud, and fresh vegetation. You assist by carrying small bundles of herbs, noting the way faith and practical care coexist seamlessly. Fringe accounts suggest that some blessings were deliberately theatrical, designed to maintain social cohesion. Historians still argue whether the ritual's efficacy was spiritual, psychological, or purely symbolic, but the communal effect is clear. Order persists and reassurance spreads. Afternoon is devoted to repairs and preparation. Fences need reinforcing, roofs patched, and tools sharpened. You kneel in the mud, securing a fence post, feeling the strain in your back and shoulders. Sparks from the blacksmith's hammer catch your eye, glimmering like tiny fireflies. The rhythm of labor is punctuated by occasional laughter, child chasing a goat, a neighbor teasing another about clumsiness. These small moments, fleeting but persistent, sustain morale. A brief shower arrives, turning paths into slick ribbons of mud. Villagers adapt quickly. Children dash under eaves. Women cover baskets of produce. Men tie down tools. You pause, letting the rain cool your skin, inhaling the earthy scent of wet soil. It is both cleansing and humbling, a reminder that nature dictates terms even amid human effort. You remember fringe stories of villagers invoking protective charms during rainstorms, though the effectiveness was likely symbolic. Historians still debate whether ritual mitigated hardship or merely provided psychological comfort. Evening draws near, bringing a soft golden glow across rooftops and fields. You gather with neighbors for a modest meal, stew thickened with barley, small loaves of bread, and a cup of weak ale. Conversation drifts between news of livestock, rumors of distant travelers, and small, amusing anecdotes. You laugh at the recollection of a child mistaking a frog for a magical creature, the baker spilling dough over the oven, and the goat that toppled a small fence last week. Humor persists as a balm, threading resilience through daily life. Night settles over the village, soft and quiet. Stars sprinkle the sky, distant and serene, while the wind carries the scent of mud, herbs, and smoke. You step outside briefly, listening to the low murmur of the stream, the occasional cluck of a chicken, and the soft snuffle of animals in their pens. The village exhales collectively, settling into the rhythm of night. Back in your hut, you place tools aside and sit by the dying fire. The warmth seeps into your bones, and you reflect on the day's labor, small joys, and persistent rhythms. Sleep approaches gently, and you crawl beneath your blanket, letting the pulse of the village, the laughter, the prayers, and the quiet vigilance carry you into dreams. Outside, the world is alive yet calm, a soft, persistent reminder that life endures, even in the face of uncertainty. The village awakens under a muted sky, the sun filtered through a gauzy layer of clouds that promises neither warmth nor harsh cold, just an in-between kind of morning. You stretch under the thin blanket, sensing the faint chill that lingers even inside the straw-filled mattress. Outside, the familiar sounds of life begin. The crowing of roosters, a dog barking somewhere beyond the fields, and the gentle murmur of water in the stream that curves like a silver ribbon through the village. You rise, pull on your tunic, and lace your boots, feeling the comforting stiffness in your joints that comes from months of labor. You step outside and are immediately greeted by the village's steady rhythm. Children dart along paths, chasing one another or fluttering after the occasional chicken. Women carry baskets of freshly collected herbs or wash clothing in the stream, their hands red from cold water despite the slow warmth of spring. Men lead oxen toward the fields, plows in tow, each movement deliberate and efficient. You join the flow, heading toward the central square, where the morning bell rings faintly in the distance. Mainstream historians note that daily life in medieval villages was regimented by both bell and season, each toll marking a necessary division of labor. Fringe historians suggest villagers sometimes used the bell as a tool to manipulate time perception, adding a sense of urgency or calm depending on circumstance. Historians still argue whether these subtle effects were intentional or merely incidental, but you feel them anyway, shaping your movements without conscious thought. By mid-morning, the village is fully awake. You work alongside neighbors to repair a section of fence damaged by recent rain, hands blistered, sleeves muddy. One child runs past, holding a stick like a sword, declaring loudly that he has vanquished a dragon near the stream. The crowd laughs, even the priest peering from the chapel doorway. Humor, it seems, is as necessary to survival as ale or bread. The fields demand attention. Barley shoots have grown noticeably, pushing through the soil with stubborn determination. You kneel beside them, pressing earth gently over seeds, marveling at the delicate green life that defies frost and drought alike. Fringe tales persist that whispering to seedlings ensures a bountiful harvest. You perform the gestures half in habit, half in hope. historians still debate whether such rituals materially influenced outcomes or merely comforted anxious hands and minds. As midday approaches, the priest begins a short blessing in the square, carrying a small bundle of herbs and sprinkling water over the gathered villagers and their crops. Everyone bows or kneels politely, some in genuine faith, others out of routine. You join quietly, feeling the subtle blend of spiritual reassurance and social cohesion. Ritual anchors life here, even when certainty is elusive. After the blessing, labor resumes. You assist in the barn, feeding livestock and mending minor injuries. A goat with a scraped leg, a chicken with a missing feather. Animals respond to care, whether practical or spiritual. A reminder that attention alone often mediates survival. A small boy watches closely, asking questions you answer with patience. Knowing that instruction here is both necessity and legacy. Lunch is simple, shared in small clusters: stale bread, cheese, root vegetables, and occasionally a small serving of ale. Conversations drift between rumors of travelers in the next town, weather predictions, and tales of trickster spirits from the forest. The oral tradition remains strong. Stories transmit both entertainment and cautionary wisdom. Fringe studies suggest that exaggeration in storytelling reinforced communal norms and survival strategies. Historians still argue over the exact balance between amusement and pedagogy. By afternoon, clouds gather once again, hinting at a passing shower. Villagers adapt quickly. Tools are moved under shelter, children run for cover. And you take a moment to pause by the stream, letting rain lightly sprinkle your face. The scent of wet earth, herbs, and animals is pungent and grounding. You notice the resilience in small details, the way roofs are patched, fences reinforced, and water carried efficiently despite the weather. Life here requires constant adaptation, an ongoing negotiation with nature's whims. Work continues until late afternoon. You haul hay, mend fences, and help a neighbor with a stubborn ox that refuses to move. Sparks fly from the blacksmith's hammer, catching in the waning light. Each one a miniature celebration of human effort against natural resistance. You pause to catch your breath, surveying the village. The colors are muted but rich. Green shoots against brown earth, gray walls against smoky chimneys, and the faint glint of water in the stream. Evening arrives slowly, bringing a soft gold to rooftops and fields. Villagers gather near the communal oven to bake bread and share news, laughter punctuating the rhythm of labor. The priest moves quietly among them, offering blessings for health and protection, murmuring prayers that blend tradition with reassurance. Fringe tales persist of saints whose spirits lingered to protect fields and livestock. And you wonder if belief or habit sustains them. Historians still argue over whether such practices were truly effective or symbolic, but their impact on morale is undeniable. Night falls, enveloping the village in soft darkness. Animals settle into pens, children retreat indoors, and the air carries the scent of bread, herbs, and warm bodies. You make your way to your hut, placing tools aside, and sit by the hearth, letting the warmth seep into your bones. Thoughts drift. The day's labor, small triumphs, minor mishaps, and the constant, comforting rhythm of community life. Before sleep, you step outside briefly. The moon hangs pale, stars scattered like pinpricks in velvet. The wind rustles through trees, whispering secrets only it knows. Somewhere, a dog barks softly, a sentinel of the night. You inhale deeply, letting the scents of earth, smoke, and life fill your lungs. Crawling beneath your blanket, you feel a steady pulse the village. The rhythm of labor and rest, the persistence of life against uncertainty. Sleep descends gently, carrying you into dreams where labor and ritual, fear and laughter, hardship and joy intertwine seamlessly. Outside, the village sleeps too, a quiet, enduring testament to human resilience, adaptation, and the shared pulse of existence. The morning arrives softly, almost imperceptibly, the sun filtering through clouds in delicate streams of light. You wake to the muted chorus of the village stirring, roosters crowing. a dog barking faintly in the distance, and the low, steady murmur of the stream threading through the settlement. You rise slowly, the ache in your joints a gentle reminder of years spent working these fields, tending animals and surviving the whims of weather and fate. Mud squelches beneath your boots as you step outside, the smell of damp earth, straw, and smoke mingling with the faint sweetness of early blooms. Children race past, their feet leaving prints in the softening soil. Chickens scatter, pecking at stray grains, while women carry water from the stream or baskets of freshly harvested herbs. Men tug plows and carts, their movements deliberate, muscles taut with the rhythm of daily labor. You join them, carrying tools and supplies, following the subtle cadence of life that has persisted for generations. Historians emphasize that such routines structured medieval villages, creating a reliable rhythm that allowed survival even under unpredictable circumstances. Fringe tales suggest that villagers sometimes whispered encouragement or blessings to the land and livestock, as if words themselves could coax productivity. Historians still argue whether these gestures were effective or symbolic, but the communal effect is palpable. By mid-morning, the village has fully awoken. You assist a neighbor in repairing a section of fence damaged during recent rains. Hands red and blistered, sleeves caked with mud. A child runs past with a stick, pretending it is a sword, laughing as they narrowly dodge a goat. The goat's stubborn resistance only fuels more laughter. Even the priest pauses to watch, his face softening into a faint smile. Humor, it seems, is as necessary as bread or ale in keeping spirits alive. The fields demand attention. Barley shoots, now stronger, push through soil with stubborn green determination. You kneel beside them, pressing earth gently over seeds, marveling at life's persistence despite frost, rain, and the weariness of human hands. Fringe tales persist that whispering to seedlings encourages growth, a practice you perform half out of habit, half in hope. Historians still debate whether such rituals materially influenced outcomes or merely comforted anxious minds. Midday brings a pause, the bell tolling softly. Villagers gather near the communal oven for bread and a brief rest. Fresh loaves, warm and aromatic, are passed around, along with small cups of weak ale. Conversations drift from the news of distant travelers to weather predictions and the tales of wandering monks or trickster spirits from nearby forests. Stories are woven tightly into daily life, serving as both entertainment and moral instruction. Fringe studies suggest exaggeration in these tales reinforced community norms, teaching lessons through narrative while sustaining morale. The priest moves among the villagers again, carrying herbs and sprinkling water over crops and animals, his voice low and steady. You assist by distributing small bundles of herbs, noting the seamless integration of faith and practicality in village life. Rituals provide reassurance, structure, and social cohesion. Historians observe that clergy often allowed or even encouraged these practices, recognizing that they bolstered productivity and compliance. By afternoon, labor intensifies. You help mend roofs, secure fences, and carry water for livestock, the mud squelching beneath your boots with every step. Sparks from the blacksmith's hammer catch in the sunlight, glittering like miniature stars. Children continue to play, weaving between laborers while women tend garden plots with meticulous care. The air hums with life. The clang of tools, the low murmur of conversation, the occasional laughter punctuating the rhythm of labor. Rain arrives in a soft shower, turning paths slick and brown. Villagers adapt seamlessly. Children dash for shelter. Tools are moved under eaves, and animals are guided to safer ground. You pause to let droplets fall on your face, inhaling the scent of wet earth, herbs, and livestock. Nature's power is humbling, a reminder that despite effort and ingenuity, the village exists in negotiation with forces beyond control. Fringe accounts claim charms and whispered prayers were intended to influence weather, and historians still debate whether ritual impacted outcomes or served primarily psychological purposes. Evening brings calm. Villagers gather near the hearths, sharing stew thickened with barley, bread, and the occasional treat. Conversation drifts from labor to stories of distant lands, magical animals, and saintly miracles. You contribute anecdotes, laughter punctuating the communal narrative. Humor and storytelling thread resilience through everyday life, softening hardships and reinforcing bonds. Night falls gently, the sky streaked with fading light and the first stars. You step outside briefly, feeling the cool air and listening to the soft murmur of the stream. The distant cluck of chickens settling for the night, and the faint rustle of animals in pens. The village exhales collectively, a shared breath of relief and endurance. Back inside your hut, you place tools aside, feeling the warmth of the dying hearth seep into your bones. You reflect on the day's labor, the small victories, and the enduring pulse of the village. Crawling beneath your blanket, you let the rhythm of life, the labor, ritual, laughter, and care carry you gently into sleep. Outside, the stars glimmer softly, the world alive yet calm. Dreams mingle labor and play, hardship and joy, uncertainty and comfort, blending seamlessly into the enduring tapestry of survival. Life in the village persists, stubborn and patient. Even as challenges arise, even as seasons shift and weather tests resilience, the pulse of the community remains steady. Laughter, toil, and ritual intertwine, sustaining both body and spirit. You breathe deeply, the warmth of hearth and home. The rhythm of labor and the gentle reassurance of communal life lulling you into the deepest sleep.